That was your Karen, was it?
Subscribe. Like. Hit the bell icon. Let's begin the story. I hope you like it. Naruto Cross Luffy.
Part 3. Get off our ship, you imbecile. Sasuke snapped out of his thoughts once he spotted a rapidly moving bearded man with dark skin and a massive build with a round body alongside relatively thin limbs shouting at him even as he picked up what appeared to be a cannonball with bare hands and threw it at him casually. Apparently, he had not escaped their notice as he had initially assumed. He dodged out of the way with a start, noting that its speed far exceeded that of sound even though it was thrown without being augmented by chakra, only to notice another one heading straight at him. Sasuke realized that these strange people around him were content with staring at him, though most of them however had picked up whatever weapons they could. It was both annoying and discomforting. I'm drawing too much attention to myself. Sasuke realized that he needed to gain information just as the ship shuddered and trembled, finally experiencing the full impact of his momentum, which had not yet coursed through the ship because of how fast recent events had taken place. Not even a fraction of a second had passed since he had caught this ship, and the impact of his momentum was already showing. Sasuke was a genius, but he was sure even Naruto would be smart enough to realize that when a flying ship riding on an aerial water stream started spinning haphazardly, it was most definitely not a good sign. The flying contraption of wood twirled in the air like a shuriken of the gods, and all the while, the black-haired teen struggled to hold onto his bearings as the ship spiraled out of control. His icy, dispassionate eyes glared at the creaking ship he had caught onto, and more specifically, he was irritated at the constant shouting from its occupants he could feel stabbing at his ears. He wondered how long would their attention on him last when there were more obvious concerns that they should address. As though answering his question, the flying contraption trembled and spiraled into a mad ascent, clearly no longer being maneuvered by any sentient creature. Its sides slammed into the harsh stream of water with enough force to completely loosen the Uchiha's grip on the wooden floor, sending him falling away from the doomed watercraft. Crash! Sasuke was almost glad that he lost his grip as he watched the ship tremble and wobble as it almost capsized and crashed into the stream with pressure to send an explosion of water right at him. The hundreds of thousands of gallons of water that were sent his way reminded Sasuke of his Tobirama and his water techniques, though possessing neither the power nor the control as those deadly jutsu of his, for it did nothing but further wet the already damp clothes he had, but did not otherwise harm his skin. However, the force of the explosion did end up propelling Sasuke plunging through the air once more without any semblance of control. Only this time around, he had nothing left to grab. And thus, Uchiha Sasuke realized an amusing fact. He hated the sky, yet he hated falling even more. He hated falling so very much. 12 days. That was how long Sasuke had stayed in this strange new world where he had been dumped by the cruel mechanisms of those wretched Otsutsuki, who for the sake of victory had desecrated reality itself. That was how long Sasuke had moved from place to place, with neither sleep nor food, continuing his mission till the point of near exhaustion. A feat that spoke volumes of his endurance that had been tested as never before, for even the Fourth Great Ninja War had not lasted for such a period of time, with neither sleep nor rest not honoring him with their presence. These 12 days had been dedicated to research and recon, using every means at his disposal after he had managed to swim to the nearest shore, which had been quite a bit away even by his rapt standards. Research of all sorts and kinds that had left him with a more adequate knowledge of the workings of the world. These remaining days had been utilized to the fullest. Irrespective of which, within the 12 days of Uchiha Sasuke's arrival in a new world, he had proved that he possessed the ability to become the greatest infiltration specialist in Konoha. He had successfully entered and exited several high-ranking government buildings in this world to obtain confidential information on several accounts, so far without getting caught. He had taken great pains to ensure that everything he did couldn't be traced directly back to him, and as such to ensure maximum confidentiality in his actions. He now looked towards his destination feeling somewhat content as he had fabricated the backstory of his existence, possessed a passable knowledge of the affairs of the world and its numerous organizations, had checked medical records of this world to protect himself from the new diseases which this world was bound to contain, and now possessed ample amount of knowledge which could count as barely acceptable as his standards. Sasuke was now, at the very least, content with his competence to conduct himself in the world. He was, however, now thoroughly exhausted. He'd been sneaking from place to place and island to island on stolen ships, something which had led him into several chases due to originally being unable to navigate properly, but he had not stopped once to eat or to sleep. He had been fighting for days on a chase with literal gods on his trail before he was sent to this world, and upon arriving here he had spent another 3 days without food or water. He was starving and he was tired. All he had confirmed from the troublesome ordeal he had faced when he had just entered this world was that he still possessed, at least to some extent, his high durability. He had crashed into the sea from several kilometers above the ground at breakneck speed, and other than the painful stinging he could still feel from his back, he was otherwise unharmed. At the very least, from the days of research that had followed after his disastrous crash into this world, he had been able to deduce some amount of information about his situation. I am in a world massively populated by monsters, tyrants, and idiots. Those words were the only thing that came to the black-haired teen's mind after he had effortlessly broken into a marine base and had spent several hours combing anything and everything he could find under the labels of history, geography, government, and literature. It was not common knowledge, but the Uchiha brain was capable of rapidly assimilating information at a rapid pace, and those with the Sharingan activated also gained a very high chance of developing an eidetic or photographic memory. This was because the Sharingan slowed down the perception of time and allowed vivid clarity needed to be able to copy jutsu and techniques. As such, their brains were hardwired to be capable of absorbing information at a more rapid pace. It was something he had put to great use as he had piled up books to his side as soon as he had entered the marine base, reading everything he could find, sparing no topic, no page left unturned. So much information. Sasuke thought, all of it, available for free through local newspapers, and then there's this. There was no small amount of amazement within him, as in the elemental nations, shinobi guarded information with their lives. Even the tiniest slip-ups could lead to the destruction of an entire hidden village. He had discovered that he was on a remote piece of land which was one of the smaller islands around Jaya, which belonged to the first part of the ocean known as the Grand Line. He had also discovered, much to his surprise, that this world was greatly vaster than anything he had experienced back home. A world whose surface was dominated by the Blue Sea, a body of salt water broadly divided into quadrants, the East Blue, the West Blue, the North Blue, and the South Blue, formed by 2 natural barriers that bisect the world at roughly perpendicular angles. These barriers were individually known as the Grand Line, a relatively narrow strip of ocean infamous for its unnatural climates and monstrous wildlife, as well as being enclosed by regions absolutely barren of wind drafts and water currents known as the Calm Belts, and the Red Line, a huge and perhaps mostly barren landmass that functions as the world's only true continent. The general geography and the rapidly shifting climate itself were occurrences state that could not be found naturally, breaking every semblance of familiarity with what was considered common within the elemental nations. At least the extremities there were constant rather than disasters that sprung without warning. Even Sasuke would have likened these shifts in climates to some powerful jutsu, if not for the fact that chakra did not exist in this world. Even more diverse were its people, distinct in both shape and form, which were separated into races, groups of sentient beings that share distinctive physical traits and propagate through natural reproduction. Many races coexist in this world, with some even claiming to be originating from the moon and beyond, a claim that had to be investigated. But geography and anthropology was not all that Sasuke was interested in. These people had queer abilities which could not be disregarded despite the fact that chakra did not, or even perhaps could not, exist in this world. People of this world were capable of physical and mental feats of strength that far outclassed what humans of his own world could do without the usage of chakra augmentation. And then there were these devil fruits which sounded suspiciously similar to mutated chakra fruits and the rumored haki which Sasuke had heard only whispers of. It had taken him a while at first, but Sasuke was steadily getting used to this world and its strangeness, which at times seemed even more exaggerated than that of his own. For now, though, he needed to figure out a way to unlock his chakra, and even he still needed to be able to find a way back home. He did not have any techniques that could allow him to get back, so his goal, for now, was to get a base of operations until he regained his chakra, then figure out a way to return home. Of course, he had the liberty to take as much time as he needed. Currently, he was more concerned about returning home than he was about Naruto's battle with those Otsutsuki, which should have long been settled by now. Sasuke simply smirked, triumph flashing through his mind as his slender fingers slowly, gently rose, and brushed against his left eye hidden behind his bangs. An eye that shined blue, a shade of cerulean blue that reminded Sasuke of warmth and sunshine. Uchiha Sasuke knew the meaning of sacrifice. He knew that sometimes when you sacrifice something precious, you're not really losing it. You're just passing it on to someone else. Dreams do come true, if only you wish hard enough. You can have anything in life if you will sacrifice everything else for it. His older brother had sacrificed everything for his village, and Mirai seemed trivial compared to that. His Ameno Dejikura allowed him to switch the special coordinates of two separate objects, and Sasuke had never felt more grateful to the old sage than he had at the moment he switched his own eye that contained the Rinnegan with that of Naruto. It was a victory in all but name. Even when exhausted and chakra-deprived, Sasuke alone was more than capable of handling an Otsutsuki by himself. It would be a trivial matter for Naruto, who far eclipsed him in raw power, to deal with those arrogant self-proclaimed gods with the power of the Rinnegan at his disposal, especially now that he was aware of their trump card. Though, his major concern now was a lack of goal, a dream to strive towards. He had always had a dream to complete, an ambition he must achieve at all costs, whether it be avenging his lost clan or bringing about the peace his brother so desired. He refused to wander about without meaning and direction, and as such, he had to decide on his next course of action. For now, I must first investigate the history of this world, obtain relevant information, and then proceed from there, Sasuke muttered slightly as he closed the book he was reading, and carefully placed it back into its place. Now, all he needed was to proceed forth with his investigations. This world was a strange place, and Sasuke was content to let it be so, if not for the traces of the Otsutsuki intervention he had found buried across known history. Look underneath the underneath. That was what his sensei had taught him, and Kakashi was many things, but a fool was not one of them. Sasuke had always taken his teaching to the heart, even at the beginning when his better judgment was clouded by revenge. He was not about to stop now. A shinobi such as Sasuke, whose skills could not be said to be inferior to any infiltration specialist in Konoha, knew how to identify the signs of subtle information manipulation meant to fool the masses, for Danzo and the shadows of Konoha had hidden the truth about his own clan using similar ways. He knew and was intimately familiar with the ways larger organizations cover the facts that they wanted to, and diverted the attention of the ignorant masses towards distractions often created by themselves in order to conceal harmful truths. The subtle lack of concise figures in the books narrating history, the intentionally misrepresented facts presented in the newspaper that covered the truth under strawmans alongside subtle misdirections, and the propaganda of the world government with discrepancies in actual statics. The list of inconsistencies was virtually endless, and so were the number of truths that the world government was hiding, some obvious ones about major incidents that were hidden from the world such as O'Hara, and some so subtle that even he could not decipher their true nature and the intent behind them, such as the facts pertaining to the Void Century. Sasuke's sharp eyes coldly noted them all. Besides, these obvious cover-ups were not the only things worth investigating. There were other strange truths that called for his attention. The fact that some of the races were said to have originated from the moon, having descended upon Earth because of a shortage of resources, reminded him of Hamura's descendants on the moon of his world. The similarities between chakra fruits and devil fruits, which were known to grant abilities upon consumption, an act that Sasuke witnessed before in the form of Otsutsuki consuming chakra fruits in order to obtain potent powers. Moreover, other than some minor changes which could be attributed to the passage of time and variation in ethnicity, the language spoken in elemental nations was almost the same as that spoken here in an entirely different world. This world was connected to his own. This Sasuke was certain of, and he knew he would get to the bottom of all this. "Hey! How did you get in here?" Sasuke silently swore at himself. cursing the ineptness that allowed him to not have noticed that someone had entered the Marine office he had illegally broken into. He glanced around and realized that outside was rising daylight, though he could have sworn it was midnight when he broke in. How long have I been here? He had gotten carried away by his own research and was now stuck in quite the situation. Sasuke glanced over to the source of the voice. It was a young man clad in a white uniform. He noted that he was clearly in his early 20s. His glasses stared at him with suspicion, even as his green eyes twinkled with annoyance while he stared at him with no small amount of anger. He had on what he knew to be the standard Marine uniform standard, consisting of a white shirt emblazoned with the emblem of their organization. Of course, the absence of the emblem on his indicated that he was not an officer of considerable rank. Are you one of the Marines stationed at this outpost? Sasuke already knew the answer. He just needed to distract him long enough to make a swift escape. The young man gave him a look that made him feel stupid. No, of course not. I am the Queen of Tado Land, an Emperor of the Sea. Sasuke paused. The response had been completely unexpected. Was that sarcasm? The man took a long look at him and then shook his head before sighing, just my luck. I got stationed in a remote posting away from the headquarters even though it was near Jaya, but sadly my headquarters was invaded by an unknown individual who was not too quick on the uptake. Such misfortune. I think my luck is cursed. Sasuke tilted his head. This black-haired individual was starting to remind him far too much of Shikamaru, who had a penchant for saying similar things and bemoaning about how troublesome the world was at regular intervals. Look man, whoever you are, I would have normally let you go since you did not hurt anyone and this base did not contain classified information, but I cannot let this slide. This goes two ways. 1, you return whatever it is you stole, and I let you walk out of here with a warning. 2, you refuse and I set the entire Marine Armada stationed here upon you faster than you can blink. Sasuke locked his gaze on the man, nonchalant nature still in place as he spoke in a dull tone. I did not steal anything. I came here in search of information. The man gave him a skeptical look and glanced at the books around him, records of past newspapers and Marine logs. You expect me to believe that in this day and age, a grown man broke into a Marine outpost in the dead of night, to read books that he could have found in any general library? The last Uchiha tilted his head as though he couldn't understand why he was so skeptical. The records and newspapers were available at public libraries, but Sasuke wanted to see their original untampered versions. Yes. Wow. I guess you really can find anything in the Grand Line. That's really something. Puru, gotcha. This is Marine General Outpost S9. How may we be of service to you? Sasuke's eyebrows rose, in which was the equivalent of most people's jaw dropping as he spotted the man holding and tinkering with a snail which he now recognized as a cell phone in hand. This is the Jack Tyler, Seaman First Class. I've got a lunatic who broke into the place claiming he here came to read. Sasuke didn't need to hear any more. The echoing laugh of disbelief over the phone was more than enough mockery for one day. He dashed towards the man, swiped the snail from his hands, and landed a swift painless chop to the back of his neck that instantly knocked him out before he could even react. He calmly then placed the man on a nearby chair as he closed his eyes and sighed. He meant the man no harm, but he could not let himself get caught by any law enforcement agency when he technically did not exist. If this world was anything like his, he'd be captured, interrogated, and if found wanting, killed. He walked away before casting a last glance at the man's unconscious form. Apparently, not all Marines were bad people. On a relatively calm day for the Sea of Grand Line, the island of Jaya was experiencing rare peace. A state of ordinary happenstance that may seem to be common in other parts of the world where men enjoyed the tranquility of life, but was, in fact, rarer than an honest pirate set about to conquer the Grand Line. The island was made up of vast expanses of dense rainforests, and also had a port and a town based around its harbors known as the Mock Town, which was infamous for being full of pirates. Normally, on any given day, one could easily find dozens, if not hundreds of pirate ships anchored at the docks alongside thousands of pirates, miscreants of society in the Scrooge of the Four Seas, drinking away at the island as their log pose reset. There were robbers, thieves, murderers, and rapists who knew no law inside the island alongside demons who desecrated the order of human society. When numerous pirates came together, it was only a matter of time before rivers of blood sparkling like streams of rubies flowed. Thankfully, even lawless scumbags knew better than to harm the innocents of the island. As the saying went, what was the point of treasure if one could not spend it? No one knew when it had started, but Jaya had been a safe haven for pirates and criminals since the dawn of the era of the heavenly dragons, when 20 kings had together brought civilization to the greater world, and it had remained so because the navy and the world government could not be bothered to come and deal with mere pirates who had taken refuge in a distant island deep into the paradise with no economic, geographic or cultural significance to speak of. It was a waste of resources, too much expenditure with no meaningful gains according to the world government, though Sasuke was sure that the women who wept with sorrow beside the rivers of blood created by these outlaws would surely disagree. The world government had sat back through it all, their weapons lay untouched in their sheath and their armadas lay abandoned on the seas, as they watched the people they were duty sworn to protect are pillaged and exploited, all for the sake of a few resources. What was the use of such an international organization, Sasuke often wondered, if they refused to help the very people they were sworn to protect? Even as the innocent screamed for help, and begged for someone to save them, to save their children. Even as outlaws steal both wealth and freedom alike. As if taking away the fruits of the hard work of honest people was not enough, as if they had not sinned the moment they plundered the food that would feed their children during harsher times and stole the money that was earned in order to protect those that they loved. He had been on the island for no more than a single week, and he had already been reintroduced to the depravity of human minds. It sometimes surprised him, the cruelties humans were capable of. Oftentimes Sasuke found himself faced with the most difficult crossroad a shinobi must face in their paths, which may yet determine their mettle as a ninja sworn to his village. It was the willingness to make the hard choices. Not the evil choices, because inflicting rape and war and pillage on a village was easy. Not the complicated choices, for there was difficulty in carrying out simple solutions and seeing them through. The hardest choices were the necessary actions one did not wish to commit, whether due to sentiment or morality, or fear in all its forms. Yet, did these things make action any less necessary? If Sasuke wanted to, he could have liberated Java in a single night, but he could not hold it and thus chose the right answer over the easy one, morally correct though it may have been. Murdering pirates who were so insignificant that the world government itself ignored them, adamant as it was on its idealized concept of justice, would accomplish nothing more than creating a power vacuum that some other tyrant would occupy after waging needless bloodshed and purging island once again. Today was a rare day because there were only a handful of pirates on the island. There were no drunken fights, no back alley murders, and relatively small property damage, for it would be unreasonable to expect pirates of all people to be reasonable. It was not much for those who were used to order and safety of normalcy, but for the natives of the island, all the peace in the world was gathered on Jaya. An occurrence rarer than storms on the Calm Belt, all things considered, but one the locals were thankful for nonetheless. Jaya had been seeing these rare days had been for the complete duration of Sasuke's stay here, though nobody so far had attributed the sudden peace to the stranger in dark robes that had recently arrived on the island. He preferred it that way for the minute good it did him. For the past week, Sasuke had spent most of his time gathering as much information as he could, as he often did ever since he had been thrown into this new world. Kakashi used to say that one must look underneath the underneath. Subtly, Sasuke also understood that to mean a competent shinobi must hide even deeper, in a layer even underneath. Insight into society comes from listening intently to the spoken words of common men. The charisma of a ruling organization, their charm, the dramatic flair, and even their physical propaganda, as Sasuke had found shortly after his arrival, was more often used to persuade audiences, as they used these stealthy tools of disguise and deception. In art and dream may a shinobi could proceed with abandon as many had in the Fourth Ninja War, which was no more than an outlier all this considered, but in situations like these one must proceed with balance and stealth. He would transform into random people, men that could walk around on any part of Jaya without arousing even the barest of suspicion. These men would drink at bars, visit brothels, and walk the streets for hours at a time. Always vigilant, and always listening. At night, Sasuke would think about all he had learned during the day. By the end of the week, he had gathered enough information to intricately know how this world worked as well as any native could, perhaps even more so. Pirates were the scum of the seas who plundered the common, and the world government ruled most of the world with impunity through the authority granted to them by the providence of the so-called gods who had created the known world. He learned of basic geography, read about ancient kingdoms, and knew of almost every important person he might encounter, the emperors of the seas and the kings of the world government. Strange birds dropped newspapers that brought him news and bounty posters that warned him of threats to be watched, and from that he created his own bingo book. He knew of the many small wars between the infamous Whitebeard pirates and atrocious beast pirates in the New World, which had started over some samurai whose name was hidden even from his reach, and the admirals of the world government who could do naught but watch as they wreaked hell blaze onto the nations caught unaware by their apparent Cold War. Apparently, these two were the infamous emperors of the sea. There were 4 in total who ruled the seas of the New World, which was on the other side of the Grand Line. They were warriors supposedly so strong that even the Navy would not dare callously confront them. He had asked everyone he met if they knew of a goddess that came from the stars or a divine tree, subtly, of course, so as to not raise any suspicion. But sometimes he just asked bluntly. So far no one had any information on either of them. It was not until the 7th day that he heard something that could possibly be a lead that might just offer some rare insights into his unprecedented situation. It was merely a rumor, a quiet tale that had been whispered of outside the dark bars that no normal man would tread upon, but at this point, Sasuke was glad for any clues whatsoever, wrong though they might be. An island in the sky and a city of gold. Even hearing it spoken out loud about seemed to indicate a connection to those infamous lunar races who remained obscure with the meager information he had about them. He had heard about this in a bar. 2 drunk men were talking about how one of the 7 warlords of the sea, a savage worse than scum known as Doflamingo, made a pirate named Bellamy murder his own first mate for apparently bringing shame to the warlord's flag. The recent incident, which had occurred just a few days before he stepped foot on the island, was retribution for the dishonor Bellamy had brought upon the warlord when he was knocked out in a single punch by Straw Hat Luffy. This altercation had apparently occurred because Bellamy made fun of the Straw Hats for daring to imagine an island in the sky actually existing. Sasuke too was one of the men who would have doubted the existence of people living in the sky right above his head. But then he remembered the village hidden in the sky and knew at once that these rumors were far from merely being the heresy of the ignorant. As people say, smoke seldom rose without fire, and every tale had a truth hidden behind it. This world had taught him to always expect the unexpected, and he had learned better than to be surprised by the eccentricities of this strange world by now. Moreover, Sasuke was also made to understand with much enthusiasm that Straw Hat Luffy had initially let Bellamy beat him without so much as raising a finger before confronting him seriously at night because of some sort of theft. This is the end of Part 3. Let's meet in the next